What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more acid techno. And we're going back to the Tracid Traxx label. We're going to another Warmduscher record. And this is another one produced by Kai McDonald, aka Kai Franz, aka Kai Tracid. Kai McDonald, again, it's the way he's credited on these releases. It's interesting, though, because I was thinking, he had his real kind of mid-90s hard trance output on a couple different labels under the names Formic Acid and Acute Genius. Then he has his most famous stuff on his own label as Kai Tracid. Again, Trance and Acid is seen as kind of his anthem. I actually think the flip side of that record, which I do have, called Pure Acid, which is much more euphoric and bubbly and kind of this otherworldly acid experience. I actually think that's the better tune. Nevertheless, and also the Trance and Acid track, there's, it's kind of the trance version of a track that DJ Misja did on his label X-Trax years earlier, which I'm blanking on the name of it in the moment. Nevertheless, it's interesting that Kai had his kind of heavy stomping acid output under the name Warmduscher, and then again, eventually there's some issues with the name, and ultimately there are Warmduscher tracks produced by other people, but again, Thylo was the face of it. It's a very confusing thing. I like it when artists have this is the name of the artist, this is the name he used, these are the tracks that, that he put out all on this one label. It's nice when it's very organized and tidy, but often that is not the case, which, just fits with human history, not just music history. So, whatever, I'll stop pontificating. We're going to listen to the tune Hardcore Will Never Die. This is Tracid Traxx 2030. I was going to say 2030, but they didn't actually put out that many records. It's just the catalog number that they use, and it gives it a sort of futuristic sound because they're all 2017, 2030, and this was early 2000s. So yeah, we're going to listen to the vocal mix. It's interesting, right? Hardcore, it's a phrase or term that means a lot of different things. If you're talking late 80s, early 90s, and you say hardcore without any other qualification, you're actually talking about this breakbeat kind of style that's it's also called early rave. And yeah, that was what hardcore was. And then eventually, the hard house sound evolves and it becomes in Holland initially and then spreading other places. By the early to mid 90s, it becomes hardcore as a lot of us know it now, especially tracks that are sort of in the gabber sound. And then ultimately, hardcore has gone into some other domains, and so there's mainstream hardcore, Frenchcore and so on, but there's still the early hardcore sound. But this is using the term hardcore, I think, just as in terms of hard, heavy stomping, techno, trance, acid type of music. So hardcore in terms of underground music, and indeed the vocal sample contrasts it specifically with, and I quote, bullshit radio music, which I know there's good music played on the radio, don't get me wrong, but that's sort of the concept here. And the vocal, by the way, is provided by Lamont Humphrey, credited on the record here. So it's a tune that if you're into underground music, you're into acid music, you're into acid trance, acid techno, that's what I think the hardcore is referencing. And ultimately, I would say, to define the track myself, it's another one I would put in the acid techno category, even though it's on a label known for acid trance. So let's get it. This is Warmduscher featuring Lamont Humphrey, Hardcore Will Never Die, the vocal cut. And ultimately, this is on Tracid Traxx 2030, 2001. And as I said, the track is actually produced by Kai McDonald, aka Kai Franz, aka Kai Tracid. Similar opening to Auf der Fresse, right? It's menacing. You know it's up to no good. It's smoking a cig about to raise some hell, but we get a moment of reprieve while it's preparing to unleash hell. Nice mixing on this too, you can creep this one in.
Hold on.
And then, yeah.
Let me tell you something about hardcore.
Smart production there.
was growing bigger and bigger and getting more commercial.
2001.
And they still call it hardcore. But I call it bullshit radio music. Some of you think that radio commercial killed hardcore. Do you really think hardcore is dead?
Was like, dude, legit, the bass was so intense it knocked it out. I would say it's the first. That's not the first time that's happened, but it's also not surprising. Hardcore may never die, but my sound system, I don't know. Such a great record. Records that I wouldn't use that to close the set. Like, I would definitely mix out there. Nevertheless, it's a banging tune. I actually forgot how good that was. Now, there's a non-vocal edit or an instrumental edit, instrumental mix. Yeah, it's cool, but I think like it's one of those tunes where the vocal is kind of like, you know, it's part of articulating sort of the vibe of the track. So I've used them both in different sets over the years, but yeah, I tend to lean more toward the vocal mix. because it just has that sort of, that extra it factor from that well-delivered vocal, which, I don't know, like, is Lamont Humphrey the guy who does the what is it, Space Frog X-Ray, which is known, like, as Follow Me? I think the subtitle is Follow Me, but that's, like, how everyone remembers it, because that's the vocal. It feels like it's, like, the same guy's voice, but maybe I'm wrong. Either way, it's a really good vocal, well used. Shout out to Kai. And again, yeah, like, I don't know at what point the Warmduscher alias became sort of like, again, my understanding is Blutonium Boy, who, like I said, it's sort of like an early hardstyle artist. I know at some point he produced tunes under that name, so I don't know if it's much after this, because at this point there's already been like 3 or 4 records, and I think they're all produced by Kai. But yeah, I think shortly after this is when it transitions to other people making tunes under that name. So anyway, let me know what you think. I'll see you next time. Peace.